All right, it being 6:30, I having established quorum, we will get started. So I will open the meeting with the approval of the previous minutes, which you have in front of you. That's from February 15th. Should have all had a copy. There was one small correction. What was it, Jacqueline? Oh, what was it?
It was really minor. It was just the wording on my question
Oh, okay.
in the response. Perfect now.
Good.
Yeah.
Any other questions or discussions on the minutes? All right, there being none, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion, do I have a second? Second, any further discussion or additional discussion? There being none, all those in favor of approving say yes.
Yes.
Opposing say no. I vote yes, it's unanimous. That's done. Okay. So I guess we're gonna start with you,
Guess so.
because Jerry's not here, and
Yeah.
so you,
Fair enough.
where's the easiest place? Maybe to sit right there? Can we
Yeah.
get him on camera too? If we,
I hope not.
Oh, that's weird.
I'll bring it to him.
all right.
Just check out the wording.
So in your packet, you should have the water sewer budget.
Let's see. Yeah, so the separate budgets,
Yep.
funded from separate enterprise funds.
So let's start with, whatever you want to start with.
Whichever one you pick.
Huh? Water.
Water.
It's pleasanter.
Water's cleaner, yeah, it's definitely the easier one. Not a lot comes out of that because we don't operate our own water system, the town of Southbridge operates it. So you'll see there's not a lot of costs associated with it. What we do carry for costs mostly aren't spent, such as, maintenance expenses, engineering, legal. Some of the training gets spent for myself for some annual training so I can keep my licenses current, and general insurance, so. There is capital replacement of $50,000 per year that we only use in case of emergency. So sometimes, some years it's used if there's water main breaks, but most years it's not, so. We fund it from the Water Stabilization Fund, from some retained earnings and revenue we collect from our IMA agreement with the town of Southbridge. The number that we have included for the true up from Southbridge, I think might be a little bit low, but it's better to be safe than sorry, so.
Oh, where's that, other two, the true up, all right, that's 13.4 down below?
Yes. Yeah, I think that varies depending on how many permits they give out and what they have for retained earnings in their own water enterprise fund. We get percentages of all that.
Mhm.
So it varies year to year. But you see, I think we pretty much level funded everything except for the OPEB contribution, which I don't have any control over. So you can yell at Ashley for that one.
That was the actuaries.
Right.
Which nobody ever understands why.
No, it's all the actuary
Yeah.
fun stuff that I don't like. I gotta have that one.
Okay.
So like I said, pretty straightforward, hopefully. And if you have any questions, let me know.
So let's move on to sewer.
Sewer. Sewer's a little more interesting. We own and operate our own system. We hire Veolia North America to operate the system annually for us. So, I mean, as you look at our salaries, this past year, you'll see our executive assistant. She's been with us for 5 years now. We reevaluated her position and her roles and responsibilities there. And working with Andrew and Lynn, we ended up upgrading her from an administrative assistant into that executive assistant. That's why you'll see kind of that big jump in her salary. So that's why that's going up. But again, she's doing the work. She's doing a great job for us, so it's well deserved. She's a great
I'm sorry,
employee.
how long has she been with you?
It's over 5 years.
Over 5.
Yeah. And over those 5 years, again, she's totally immersed herself and taken on more than kind of what she was originally hired for. So fortunately, we were able to kind of realize that and kind of make her whole for doing the extra work. So that worked out well. And then again, my increase is just on par with what everybody else is getting, right?
Yeah,
Which-
2.5 we put in.
Yeah. Under payroll related expenses, again, all of that is out of my control, that those numbers are put in by Ashley. So what we do have control over is our maintenance expense line item, our annual line item. We increased that 10%, just because, as we all know, cost of goods are increasing. And we've been replacing quite a bit more parts over the last couple of years, so I just wanna make sure we don't run short on that. The sewer plant operations, this pretty much pays for Veolia and chemicals. They pay for all the chemicals and kind of some sludge disposal and for all of their kind of payroll and employee costs for them to operate the plant annually. So that's in our agreement, our annual agreement. And there's a CPI increase as part of that. That's tied to 2 different CPI indexes that gets averaged out and they figure out their increase for us, so. You'll see that's.
12% is.
12% covers, if you look at the previous year, it didn't include it. So this, that 12%, the increase happens mid-year. So it happens in November. So the increase just happened last November, that was 7%. So this is making up for that, plus what's gonna happen next November.
Yeah. Yeah, so their budget, because we added 100,000 at town meeting in November.
Because we didn't know, because it was still
Right.
out to bid. We didn't know what the actual contract cost was gonna be.
So that number was really what, 775? Well, you
no.
added 100. You added 100, so maybe not just to that line, but you added another 100,000
Yeah,
at
so
town
the
meeting.
you look at FY '23, that 675 was best guess.
Yeah.
And then we had to, because we were out to bid, we got the bid, we went the year, and then we didn't add the CPI index for FY '23.
Right. So that number.
Because we didn't know what that was gonna be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this 12% covers FY '23's increase, plus hopefully FY '24's increase, which will happen November of
November when you
'23.
go on to rebid.
So it wasn't a 12% increase for just 1 year.
Okay.
Even though it's
Just
kind
no,
of-
we
that's kind- that's kinda
we
how-
question anything over
Yeah.
4%.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
I get
that's-
it, I get it, yeah, no, I welcome the
Right.
questions,
Yeah.
definitely. And again, all of our other, pretty much engineering, legal, training, and all that stuff is level funded, our annual I&I. And again, most of the engineering and legal, we're fortunate, we don't usually use those much at all. Training we use, again, the loan administration fees is outside of my purview, same with general insurance. Annual I&I, the infiltration and inflow, we use sporadically, but we're seeing higher flows during rain events, we're gonna start using that a lot more and probably try and get aggressively go after that to try and find out where that additional flow is coming from. So we're gonna be probably using more of that on an annual basis, but that's been level funded for as long as I've been here, which is just over 5 years also. Moving down, sewer debt, that's something that's just set and is annual. Our sewer capital, we carry 100,000 annually, and we kinda use probably 75 to 80% of that, depending on how many major components we have to replace throughout the year.
Mhm.
So our maintenance line item we use for kind of recurring costs, recurring maintenance costs. Capital we use for kind of, they're not one-time replacement, but they're not recurring annually. So we try and differentiate where those monies are spent based on kind of that criteria. And it seems to work out. We're fortunate we have enough revenue coming in that we can substantiate our budget and self-fund it. So you'll see we have user charges coming in at 1.1 million, privilege fees that are being paid at 140,000. It's probably one of our last years of betterment payments coming in of 308, because I believe we're on our final payment for the betterments for the Phase 2 project. And that pretty much funds our budget.
Mhm. So when betterment runs out, you gotta cut the budget above somewhere, right?
Yes.
Or do you just dip into your reserves and?
No, the maturing debt service will come out. Again, that's a revenue. That debt is a revenue. I mean, that
Right, the betterments
betterment's
is a revenue, right, so when the
But-
revenue decreases,
But your debt should fall
Our
off.
But your debt-
maturing debt should go away.
oh, okay, the 119 up above.
Yep.
All right.
We do have some long-term debt that we're carrying, I think, no, I shouldn't say
I-
long-term, but we do have a project that should be paid off fairly soon
Yeah, I
as
have to
well.
look. I think it's in the next couple of years if it's
Yeah.
not next year.
That's funded from privilege fees, but based on what we're seeing for user fees collected annually, we're doing fairly well. We've had retained earnings, fairly high over the
Mhm.
last few years as well, so
Mhm.
I think feel like we're in a decent spot.
Mhm.
So if that betterment does go away and there is still a little bit of debt that we have to pay, we won't be under the gun to have to increase user fees or anything like that.
Questions?
Just a quick question to you, Ashley. The regional retirement jump? What,
Everybody saw that jump.
Right, but what exactly, what's driving it?
That was something that probably happened, some increase that probably happened back years ago, but we saw the same jump too in our general fund budget. There was just a huge increase for everybody this year. I think ours was like 15% increase, and their average goes back, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago from whatever happened back then. They like stagger it out, and then you see that increase at the end of then they go back out again, and we'll see an increase for the 2%
Is it
we
amount of
just
people
voted.
retiring?
It's the
It's a
actual,
combination of both, yeah. It's
Yeah.
an actuary number that they come up with, and then they give us almost like a plan, like, okay, this is kind of gonna be how much you're gonna see for the next 5 years, and then they go back and the actuary studies it every year. So that was just how the split, and you did have somebody retire, maybe somebody picked up benefits, so
Yes, we
that
did
number
have
could have
someone retired
changed, yeah,
Maybe 3 years ago now.
Okay.
yeah, so.
Yeah,
It
it's
just
almost like-
fluctuates, that actuary number.
yeah, it's a balance between the retirees that are going on, the increase in the total salaries, and then just the overall funding of the plan itself. I think it's 52% funded overall.
Right.
So they're trying to build that up, so I think that's more or less an actuarial number where they come in
Yeah.
and say,
Okay.
based off of all of this calculation, here's your assessment.
So it's universal across all departments?
Yes, yeah, because we saw like a 15 or 16% increase in our assessment this year.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are any of the larger, newer projects looking into water and sewer? Does that impact your budget at all?
No, it's gonna impact our retained earnings. So Amazon has already connected to sewer,
Okay.
and they've had to pay quite a large privilege fee, so that'll show up as retained earnings.
Mhm.
And once they start flowing, we'll start billing them based on that, so what we're gonna see from waste from them, it shouldn't impact our operations too much, so we should see a better impact on the revenue side
Right,
than
So that's
the cost to operate.
okay.
Yep.
And what about the more industrial, the power project there, is that gonna?
We don't have sewer down there. The
Oh,
LNG
okay.
facility?
It doesn't go that far
No,
down? Okay,
no,
I
we
didn't
don't have
know that.
anything on Route 169, so
Okay, thanks.
that's outside.
Pete, have you
of us.
heard anything from Amazon as far as operation time schedule?
Yes, the end of September of 2024.
That's when you should start seeing some flow.
It really depends. I think they're still waiting for infrastructure, but their plans are to get it done as soon as they can and get it operational, so.
Right, you're not connected to the water.
They are connected to
Oh, they
water
are
also.
connected to water
Yep,
also.
but again, that's operated from the town of
Right,
Southbridge, so we
so
don't,
minimal impact.
yeah,
on
not really.
us. Right.
And again, it's a huge building. Their usage will be 12 to 15,000 gallons per day. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot. The Overlook uses 45,000 gallons per day.
Oh,
So
wow.
schools, Carl Storch uses 7,500 gallons per day. So, the scope of the size of the building, like, holy cow, they're gonna use a bunch of water and a bunch of sewer. That's not the case,
Right. It's because there's a lot of robots in there, not people.
Mostly automated.
supposedly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, time will tell, but
Mhm.
that's kind of what we're planning.
Kind of along your line, the building's gotta be fire protected. Do they have their own tanks?
They have 2 tanks,
They
yes.
have 2 tanks?
Yeah.
All right, so
2
they won't-
tanks, 2 fire pumps, yep,
Yep.
complete redundancy
Yep.
when they're finally done.
Hopefully, yeah, a little warmer weather, they'll be able to paint the inside of the tanks and actually get them filled, so.
Yeah. Good. Anything else of,
Good.
well, we got him?
We're good?
Thank you very much,
Great.
Pete, coming
Thank
in
you.
and explaining it
Appreciate
all to us.
Thanks, Pete.
I'll warm up, Chief. Thank
Have
you.
a nice night, everyone.
I don't know if Kathy's out in the hallway.
I saw her walk in.
That's what I thought I saw her come out. Oh, she's not live.
I'm just waiting for my turn, apparently.
You didn't want to come sit in here.
I didn't want to interrupt.
Hello.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Kathy, you wanna introduce yourself to the board?
Kathleen Stanley, I'm the Director of Assessing. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So I submitted the budget with no changes for this year. I know you have a lot of requests for changes and
No, where did you hear that?
our department has a change because Janet's retiring in July after 26 years. So we are going to have a change, but that'll be something that's worked out within what we have for a budget. We did just go through certification last year, so we will have another certification, but not for 5 years. There will be a software upgrade that will be coming, so we're sort of working with Patriot, and we might have to do like an RFP or something in the next 6 months or so, but we can work, I believe, with what we have, so I'm just submitting it as is.
Now, I find it odd that there's no subscriptions on here for some software services like
Don't tell Jeff,
most
it's
other
all in his
depart-
budget.
Huh?
It's all in Jeff's budget. That's why he complains. Cause so her Patriot Properties sits
that's in this
that sits
budget.
in yours, but like, so they use Vadar, like we do, and that's all in IT.
Yeah, because the Vadar is for multiple departments, it's not just for our
Yeah.
department.
Right, but Patriot
But
sits
the
in you.
Patriot is in here.
And then
um,
you use the GIS, but that's through Sierra and
The
PC.
GIS is through CMRPC, and then we have so many, we have the subscription that CMRPC is, all towns pay a certain amount, and then additionally, we do a Muni GIS software program that I do think comes out of
That's in
IT.
Jeff's, yeah.
And then we get our mapping done, so we follow all the plans that go through planning and are registered at the Registry of Deeds, and every July 1st, we have all of those, we assign new lot numbers to them, and then we submit them through CMRPC to get the maps updated. In fact, we just got new planning maps that came through, and new maps this week, so we do work with it that way. So there are changes coming, but I think that there's some things that will move around that we can work within what we have for this year, and then next year we'll have to see if we end up doing a multi-year contract. The Patriot has new software that they've come out with, and they're slowly putting pressure on communities to upgrade to the new software that they've come out with. They haven't done that to us yet, but at some point they will. So I do anticipate that there might be some changes next year when I have a better handle on how we want to proceed with that information, but right now I think we can work with what we have.
Mhm.
I have to commend Kathy, because she went out and assessed all the properties by herself last year. And that's all the properties, so we can get certified.
And to get the new growth, because
Yeah.
that's where all of it
She
comes
did a
from,
good job.
That's right.
so I thought, yes, everybody is sort of going after money because they think, oh, all the money's coming from Amazon this year,
Right.
even though it's just under construction, and so it is a little bit preliminary to count on all of that, but there will be some new growth, and we'll go out and try to get the new growth as much as we can. So our office does kind of generate all of the income, but we're not asking for money this year, you know?
I am curious on a building like Amazon, which I'm sure you've never seen before. Do you hire an outside company? You
Yeah,
do.
yeah, we worked with an outside company through the TIF process as well, and then we built it into the TIF that Amazon would actually have to pay for a third party to help with that. There's only one other building in New England that's that size, so yeah, it's not anything anybody's
Yeah,
really seen
yeah.
before.
Same thing with the LNG plant, you get somebody.
Yes, yeah. And we don't have a TIF with LNG, but we have been working with somebody, and we did get them to pay for some appraisal costs so that we have some information to go forward on. They're a little unique because they may try to get a manufacturing exemption, and that's probably a longer story than you want to get into right now. But we'll see whether they do, and if so, the town is prepared to do what we have to do to get the money that we should be getting
Yeah.
for the facility, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions of Kathy here?
You do?
Yeah, I know you guys have a lot on your plate with all the budgets, so, but we'll do the best we can from the assessor side to get the new growth that we can.
Just keep bringing it in.
We'll just keep bringing it in.
I'm in her office all the time asking.
And everybody else will spend it, right?
That's right,
Well, next year we might be asking, but this year we'll leave it as is.
Thank you very
All
much,
right,
Kathy.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Nice to
Kath.
meet you.
All right.
Look at that, Chief. We might get you home
Yeah,
early
you get
tonight.
extra time, see?
Right.
Oh, actually, I need to go grab his,
Thank you.
your reserve fund transfer. Brought the money back.
Oh, yeah, I got 2 parts tonight.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, we'll do the budget first, and we'll do the transfer
Okay.
after.
Good evening, all.
Okay.
So I provided Hank with an updated,
So this is the full.
and that's for you guys to keep, to, a lot of it's just background.
I'll just sign real quick. Just sign right there. You, I'll close it. And then you can just pass it down to Hank. Just, that's his reserve fund transfer request.
So, usually what I like to do is kind of give you the highlights of the budget request. We try, now that I know Pete uses 10% as a figure, I'm gonna start using 10%. I usually try to stick around 5, so good to know. But
Didn't you
obviously.
hear me say we question anything over 4?
It's okay,
Right?
I can justify it.
All right.
So, obviously, first thing on the list, and you know, in having numerous conversations with Andrew and Ashley, we're looking to hire more people. And the biggest part of the reason is if you had a staffing audit done of our department, it would, I can guarantee you it would come back with 8 more people. I was lucky enough, Auburn just did one last year, so I kind of took theirs off of public record and, you know, highlighted in their audit just things that matched up with us. So that's why we're looking for 4 people. And like I said in here, since 2019, so we're only talking a period of 4 years, we've lost over 10,000 hours due to injury and sick time, which is equivalent to roughly 5 people working for a year.
So when you say lost, they were out for extended periods of time, they come back.
Yes.
Okay? So it's not like they've left you.
Right.
They're just,
But
but you've lost.
So we were short
Right.
for a period of time, incurred overtime,
Right.
you know, and we can attribute it to, some of it was off-duty injuries, you know, trying to stay fit and trying to do things that, you know, a 50-year-old guy wouldn't do. We got 30 and 20-year-olds who like to ski down big mountains,
I think
don't
they'll
avoid
live forever.
trees,
Oh,
so.
Chief, any disability issues or anything? Any long-term?
So we've had some IODs injured on the job, and we had one individual who was out for a complete year. And then he was retired out, just because he wasn't gonna be able to come back. So, yeah, that's part of it. You know, and that's the big hit. And in talking with Ashley and Andrew, I am up to, you know, I'm not demanding, I'm not looking for 4 here right now. I can work that any way you want, one at a time, over a span of 4 years, whatever, however it works. I'm also applying for the SAFER grant, that's FEMA grants that we got it back in 2016? 16 or 17, we got 9 new hires.
I remember that.
Yep, so I'm filing that by Friday.
Mhm.
I'm asking for 4, so that may be, you know, my way in.
And how long was that grant? That was more than a year, right?
It's 3 years.
Is it 3 years?
It's 3 years fully funded.
You got
Yeah.
2 of them last time, didn't you? Because there was one, oh, maybe I did it in 19. I was here when I was here. So it would have been in 19 last time,
Well,
your other one. Right?
not for
No,
the SAFER.
not for the SAFER grant.
No, the last time we got the SAFER grant approved was back in 16. It took us a while to hire them.
Maybe that's why, because I was like, I was still here when I was here, I feel like, when I
Yeah,
started
we
in
got,
19.
that may have been actually getting them on the books.
Maybe, the transferring.
Yeah. So, that could be a funding resource,
Mhm.
but again, highly competitive grant process that we didn't get last year.
Would you know by May?
No, no, it's the federal government.
I don't know if their timeline hooked up with our timeline and made it easier.
Never does, never does. What else can I talk about? So obviously, union contracts, so we've got standard across the board based on the collective bargaining agreement. There's increases in pay, benefits, and whatnot.
Are you also in the same retirement plan, the same Worcester County?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
they're just a different group.
Yep.
A lot of the increases you'll see in ours is maintenance and supplies, obviously supply lines and supply chain issues. Apparatus, which is part 2 of my big pain in the neck, which is why every year I bring up the town, trying to find a town mechanic,
Mm-hmm.
fund a town mechanic so that we can get all this work done and not sending trucks out to Hopkinton to get fixed and paying those labor rates.
Mm-hmm.
The labor rates for my individuals to take the truck down.
Take the
and back.
truck down.
So Chief, the Article 15 wages, the 70 grand you're not taking advantage of?
So Article 15 wages went away in the last contract. Article 15 was a stipulation in the contract for a number of years where the first 6 hours of overtime that they worked
Yeah.
was at straight time. That went away in the last contract. Last year we did that?
Yep.
Yeah. So now everything over there, 42, is overtime. So what we did this year was we took that money that was in Article 14 and moved it into the overtime account.
Okay.
So that's why that's at 0 now. It no longer exists.
Yep.
Again, looking at health screenings, so it was, all of this stuff is in the budget now, so that's all I really have for changes and stuff like that. I open it up to any questions.
So in your highlights, you've got capital request for building needs at Station 2. What more work do you need? Other than to tear
So-
it down and rebuild it, but, I mean,
Tear it down, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, we've always been, truth be told, I mean, we're just waiting for it to fall is what we're waiting for it to do. I'm not gonna put any money into it unless it's something that it needs to be done, a door needs to be replaced or something. But once things start falling off, it's kind of, gotta find a new place to park some vehicles. And that's why the substation committee is, up and running now, and hopefully
Mhm.
we can make some progress there.
mhm. And we haven't allocated any money for
So.
the feasibility study with that group, have we?
So,
Or
Board of
is that
Selectmen,
coming?
yeah, so the Board of Selectmen had allocated 50,000 from the ARPA money to go toward feasibility.
Yep.
It was more or less, hoping that we could have gotten to some at least number to know, all right, if we could take something to town meeting with.
Yep.
So we went out to bid, first using the not to exceed $50,000 number, and basically didn't have any biters. We had 22 people pull bids, not a single one submit, so it was kind of our litmus test of saying, hey, we're probably asking for too much for the scope of work. So we did little tweaks to the scope and just basically put a fee to be negotiated. We went back out, we received three bids for architects. The committee evaluated and decided on one. We've gone through fee negotiations with them, and essentially their overall scope of work was about $173,000 for the full scope of getting to an actual, here's what the building looks like and here's the cost.
Mm-hmm.
So, understanding that we have $50,000 to work with, we've kind of pared that down to a response time analysis and a needs, or in a space needs analysis.
Mm.
So that way, for consideration of Finance Committee and Board of Selectmen to consider a free cash allocation to cover the remaining amount, potentially in the spring with the free cash that we have remaining from the prior year. So that way, over the summer, we can do the site development and the cost analysis, so that way in the fall, we could potentially go and actually get a project for consideration.
Okay. So we're on the way.
Right, so-
That's basically what I was.
So the next
making
ask
sure
for,
that-
for this committee would essentially be to consider an article for $130,000 from free cash to
Yeah.
essentially fund phase 2 of feasibility.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. And the response time analysis, I'm assuming, is if you locate it here, you can get to the town areas in X amount of time, and where's the best place to site it? Okay.
Yeah, in a town this big, you need a substation. It's just, it's the only way you're gonna
Yep.
be able to, supply the services that the town is looking for.
Mhm.
Benefits are, obviously, new building takes care of that problem down the street at Station 2, because we'll be able to move some of those vehicles into the new building. It'll improve your ISO rating, which is out of the insurance industry,
Mhm.
and that may have an impact on citizens on that side of town as far as reducing their rates
Mhm.
with their insurance company. And response time, fire or EMS seconds matter, so we have two phrases, fire doubles in size every minute, and we call it heart or brain muscle. You lose brain muscle every second that you don't have the proper service and interventions needed, so.
Okay. This new building would be to house all the equipment, or you said some of the equipment, or majority of, that's in this building here? Is that the size building we're talking about, something that?
So, and again, we won't know until the space needs is, but we're looking at 3.5, maybe 4 bays at this station, through and through, so you'll be able to stack them if you have to.
Yep.
Big thing is, Board of Selectmen seem to want to get the tower out of the Quonset hut across the street from us,
Mhm.
because that's on leased land.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Pay almost 10 grand a year right now
Mhm.
to lease the land,
Okay.
keep that thing housed.
Yep. So this request for more money would come by October sometime?
So
Or
what we
you
would-
think this May?
What we're thinking is this May to fund the phase 2 of the feasibility study. And that's,
Okay.
part of the money too that we had retained in free cash for potential capital needs that would come up in the spring. There's another, ask related to the school. We'll be asking for some guidance from the finance committee as
Mhm.
far as how you want to proceed with, but this would be, I think a very beneficial use of that, to move
Mhm.
that project along and get it going, so that way in the fall, when we typically talk about capital, when we could potentially be looking at some vote on, not on a ballot, or on a national ballot, but at least at the same time as
Yeah.
election day, maybe fall in line with that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, get the town meeting vote and the ballot votes, we can start building a new building.
Mhm.
Through the chair,
Yeah,
can I ask
yeah,
a question?
yeah.
So have we expended all of our ARPA funds?
Currently, I have allocated most of them. We still have $238,000 of unallocated funds. But it's not, allocated is not spent. So
Right.
there's a lot of money that's been
Earmarked.
earmarked to certain projects but has not been expended.
So follow-up question, couldn't we use some of that to just outright fund the rest of the feasibility analysis?
Correct. So looking at, this is another conversation. Looking at the school, the Shepherd Hill renovations, we know that they're going to be essentially looking for $500,000 from the town to be secured before June 30th. We understand at this point the $50,000 that's been allocated to this project hasn't gone to any town meeting, hasn't gotten any public, true public support.
Okay.
The thought being that at least if we go to town meeting, there's been a public vote, and it hasn't just been held on this side. From the school perspective, there's a few different angles, really between Finance Committee, Board of Selectmen, looking for the right guidance on either a capital exclusion, so one-time taxpayer funding by ballot vote to fund that project, or potentially taking $200,000 from ARPA funds and $300,000 from free cash to fund that. So,
To at least get we figure we wanna give the taxpayer, or the people that come to town meetings, one of the taxpayers a say in funding the school ask. So it's not, so we're being more transparent that way and not just saying, okay, well, we pushed this project on you because we used ARPA funds and then didn't give you a say, so when they come up for the MSBA and say, hey, we need a brand new school, hey, we need renovations, it's not a shock to everybody.
Right. I just was thinking if there's restrictions on ARPA funds and feasibility studies is something that's allowed.
Yeah.
I mean, I know you can't use it for anything.
Right, we had
So I
a real,
figured-
Andrew had a really good plan the other day, and I had to shoot him down, because
Oh.
we have 90 grand in bond proceeds from when we borrowed for the 1.4 million for the public safety building.
Mhm.
We were able to, through borrowing, we saved 90 grand, so we have to spend that, but we have to use it on a similar project. And he's like, oh, can we use it for feasibility? And I was like, no.
yeah,
can't.
it has to be.
If you have a building, yes, so I could take 90,000, we can vote to take the 90,000 off a fire station, but it has to be used towards something that's borrowed for the same length of time, and a feasibility isn't. So we had a good plan going the other day, but,
Shut down by the finance guys.
yeah.
Alright, sorry for diversion.
So we've been brainstorming ways, because we have the school asked for the 500,000 plus the roof project that we have to think about, plus the plus the fire station feasibility study, so we've kind of been brainstorming ways to pay for it.
So unfortunately, the school seems to cast this cloud over everything in town, and every discussion has got to include something about the school.
Well, at least we're holding
Until we get it
separate.
squared away.
We've got it all in view, yeah.
The strategy has essentially been, let's use ARPA money to bring the total ask down, so that way it makes it a little less painful. And that's kind of what we've done with the school roof so far,
Yeah.
and looking to do with this project and potentially the feasibility study.
That's a good plan. Thanks.
From an operations budget standpoint, anything you want to bring to light, any?
No, pretty standard across the board as far as, increases. I have lost a couple of call people, so there is potential for my actual call wages to go down,
Mhm.
but to be determined.
And now the dispatcher comes into police, not fire.
Correct.
Yeah.
But if you ask the police chief, he says he shares.
And I've heard
I will
that-
more than happy take over half of the expense for dispatches as long as I had to say who gets hired and fired and what jobs.
No, but I did hear that you were in favor of a sick dispatcher.
And I'll be quite honest with you, the town of Charlton has done a disservice to police and fire with having one dispatcher on at a time.
I've heard.
Because all it takes is that one call.
Mhm.
And if you have a scanner, or if you've ever listened to the dispatcher, it can get quite hectic in there, especially with a big event where both entities are at.
Mhm.
So has anybody pushed for a second dispatcher?
They
Yeah,
just-
it's-
yeah, they got their
it's-
sixth.
It's in the police budget for the,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
actually the 6th dispatcher,
Yeah.
which then allows them to time it so that there's
Yeah.
there's
Yeah,
two during
and
that.
we've developed the peak, we've, through research, done the peak hour analysis, and so he's kind of doing like an 11 to 7 type of thing to have that person on. And he has the ability to call back, but, when you call back on a fire at midnight, who wants to come in at midnight in a winter storm to
Right.
dispatch?
Right.
And how long is it gonna take him to get there? Should be two dispatchers in there all the time, but that's me.
I think he's able to have, with the 6th dispatcher, if I'm correct, he can have 2 on for like 2 peak shifts.
Mhm.
Right, that's what he was doing with the 6th, he was doing like a day and like a mid, or whatever his 2
Right.
busiest shifts were, so only, instead of having 2, like a mid, I think he was able to 2 full shifts and then just have 1 with 1 person.
And that would probably be the overnight.
I think that's what he said. So maybe on the
Well,
weekends, he might put 2 on or something.
And many moons ago, I was the overnight dispatcher, so
You were.
I know how busy it can get.
Well, that's one of those positions I think that we're gonna fund no matter if we gotta cut the school budget or not. It's
Sure he'll be
important.
happy, and I
It's
will be too.
It's important.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to hear you say that you support that.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and you can go back, I've written letters in support of having it. In fact, I did all the research, but he won't admit that.
All right. Nothing else on this?
And like I said, the book I provided you, please look into it, read it.
Yep.
There's valuable information in there. There's, again, the Auburn feasibility study that, for the staffing is in there. There's also an article on fatigue and what it does as far as injuries and whatnot.
Mhm.
So I just don't come to ask. I know if I'm asking,
I know,
I better have something back.
You've always been good that way, Chief, about backing it up. Any further questions of the chief? Operation budget, go ahead.
How have ambulance receipts been from pre-COVID to now?
We've actually, I'm gonna say there's slight increases now, but we didn't really see too big of a dip as far as calls. So we were always a million, right? It's always been a million or over a million.
Yeah, I think so. We
Last year was 1.2 or something. like
Yeah, I
that.
think we were thinking there was gonna be a dip, but then we got,
Yeah, and there's
they
a
level funded us through, was it the Medicare reimbursement, Medicaid?
Medicare reimbursement, we get a good chunk back.
That saved us last year.
You know, it's a process that we have to file for and submit, and every year we get money back from the Medicare side of things.
Mhm.
And this year, we're actually getting back a good chunk of money too. We
Oh,
got
good.
About $100,000
Good.
from that, so.
Mhm.
And that goes to the general.
No, that goes right into your ambulance,
Okay.
stays there. Cause that's all through the
Yeah,
reimbursement,
right,
right, yeah,
it
so that's all
stays
for
there.
medic, yeah, that stays right in your ambulance fund, which is nice, cause we can use it to buy ambulances.
Right, but the ambulance funding goes back to the general.
Mm-mm.
Don't that stays?
Well, if we move it at town meeting, yes, but it technically stays in the fund until we allocate to
Until
move
you
it,
actually
yes.
move it?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I've been begging, give me a fund where I can buy an ambulance when I need an ambulance.
Yeah, so what we decided is, when he wants to buy an ambulance, we're gonna do it in May, just move the amount at the Maytown meeting,
Mhm.
instead of making him wait till October, and then he could buy it at any point within the next fiscal year.
Mhm.
So after July first, he can buy it in July, he could buy it, wait till the following January to buy it, but he wouldn't be bound, cause we're gonna move it in the beginning of the year.
Mhm.
So at least help him not have to wait till October or November,
Does
since
that help you? or-
It'll help, but
just gotta get caught up
ideally, I'd love
first.
to have the funds when I need the funds. Because,
Isn't that funny? Wouldn't we all?
yeah, you're right,
Right?
you're right. It's just in that situation where, when you need an
Yeah.
ambulance, you need an ambulance.
Right.
We got 4 now?
3.
3. That's all? That's awesome. For some reason I thought we had
Is there a long lead time on ambulance?
There is now.
There is.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to get your last one? It was like
16 months.
Oh,
That's
wow,
crazy,
a really
yeah.
long lead time.
Yeah, it used to be 180 days, and we'd get them before then, but then
Yeah.
the COVID word hit, and now everything's
And
pushed
it
out.
just never bounced back the way it used to.
And we placed the order, I talked to Andrew, we placed the order before even, because we knew we were in a waiting time frame, so I've already got another one in process.
Mhm. Mhm.
I try to replace them every 3 years. But in the last situation where we got the delay on that ambulance, A2, we essentially beat up the other 2 trucks. So that's why I had to push my
Right.
request up a year
Yeah.
for another one.
Oh, just that much more wear and tear on the other 2.
Yeah.
to catch us back up.
The oldest one already has 140,000 miles on
That's not really that old.
Within a 3-year time frame.
it.
100,000. Wow. All the different drivers, which doesn't help engines and clutches
Oh,
and
that-
brakes. That's
We'll
another
get into
story.
drivers. That's a constant battle.
But that's 45,000 miles a year. Just within, basically primarily within the town.
Here to Worcester.
Yeah.
You know, Worcester, yeah.
That's as far as we go, is Worcester.
Right.
Adds up fast.
Any other operational budget questions?
Actually, the only question I do have, Henry, is, so Chief, you mentioned a full-time mechanic?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a new addition.
Well, wouldn't be for me.
Okay,
I'm proposing for the whole town.
okay.
Because we've got enough vehicles, we've got a fleet within town that basic maintenance can be done by this individual. And I think somebody's gotta do the investigation to see how much, but I think labor rates alone, just having somebody in town at a salary rate is gonna save money over the long term.
Probably exponentially.
Is your idea like a bay down at the highway department where everybody rotates their?
As soon as that falls, you can have, you got a nice plot of land there where you can put in a lift and
Just in a building.
Okay.
So where does that appear on the budget?
it's not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not, right, that's just one of his highlights,
It's on
but
the
I
wish
know that
list.
if Jerry were here, he probably would say the same thing, and I think the police chief said the same thing. He was
Yeah.
looking for somebody that.
Yeah, I mean, just, simple
Oil
oil
changes.
changes and brakes, stuff like that. I mean, we use local sources in town on a lot of this stuff, but some of the bigger repairs that we have to get sent out, it's just time away from being in service. And that's where the second request comes from. It's,
Mhm.
that truck's sitting in Hopkinton now, waiting to get fixed.
Mhm.
Yeah, at what labor rate?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, nothing's cheap. All right, there being no other questions of the chief on the operational budget? All right, let's move on to, the chief has submitted a reserve fund transfer request. Chief, do you want to explain what happened to the truck and why you're looking, he's looking for $20,000 or up to $20,000 to repair one of his trucks.
So, this truck has been a thorn in my side since we got it, but, and I did an analysis over the last 3 years. 20% of my apparatus maintenance budget typically goes towards this truck.
Mhm. One truck.
Yep. And that's just, preventative maintenance, but we've always had problems with it throwing codes. And it's the new DEF systems within the diesel trucks and stuff. And
Is this a tanker?
No, it's an engine.
It's an engine.
Yeah. And in this particular case, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we had it where it essentially told us to shut the thing down and don't drive it anywhere, because we had so many codes being thrown on the system. So in talking to repair place in town and the manufacturer's recommended repair shop, they gave us a worse estimate because they said we can't give you a solid estimate until we actually go in and see what the codes are and start clearing them for what it is to see what the actual problem is. So they gave us a worst case scenario of $20,000 if they had to replace the whole DEF system within the truck. We haven't gotten anything back yet. It went out there Monday morning it was delivered into Bulldog in Hopkinton.
Mhm.
And we're awaiting, they said it was gonna take at least 6 to 8 hours to fully diagnose it,
Mhm.
give us some sort of estimate.
Mhm.
That being said, the reason, and my hope was it wasn't gonna cost $20,000 for that repair, but right now I think I'm at 94% spent
And
in my apparatus budget.
Right.
And I've got roughly $1,700 to get me through the rest of the year. And we've still got basic oil changes and whatnot to go on the rest of the fleet.
Mhm.
So my hope was that this wouldn't be a worst case scenario, and I was hoping I'd be able to put that additional money into that budget to
Mhm.
kind of get me through the end of the year.
So if this system ends up repairing cost of $10,000, they give you another 10 to get you through.
And just so you know that I am being cost conscious. I have a vehicle that has some lighting issues that we took out of service. It cannot respond as an emergency vehicle because I don't have the funds to fix the lights.
What is it,
It's a pickup truck. It's the squad that we use as a chase vehicle.
Yep.
So we've taken it out of service and started using the forestry as a chase vehicle.
So if you remember, we start the year with $150,000 in our transfer reserve fund. And throughout the course of the year, we get requests. Well, we've not gotten any requests up to this point, so we still have $150,000 in there. So allocating 20 to the fire department for repairs, all right, is not gonna cripple us, or I don't think we've only got a few months left, as you said. The only question I will have is, at one point you alluded to an overtime funds issue. Is that still on the horizon?
Possibly, but in looking at some of my other line items within the wages account, I am projecting money to be left in there. So what did I say? I was close. I was like 30 to 35 that
Yeah.
I thought I would have at the end of the year, and my
Mhm.
projection for overtime is about 40,000. So I'm close.
Right.
So you may be back for a couple of bucks, but back then, I think
he might-
you were talking some serious
Yeah,
dollars.
he might even be able to move from other lines too, as long as he's bottom dollar.
Yeah.
We'll just do it in May.
And like I said earlier, based on the operation budget for next year, is my call wages are way down just because we've had a couple of people retire. We've hired them full-time now, so,
Yep.
and we're not in any position to backfill it, so.
Okay.
So there is potentially funding in that line item,
Mhm.
where the ask won't be anywhere where I thought it was gonna be.
Mhm.
And that was, the reason for that is this year we went into it not knowing what the overtime rate was gonna be because of the change in the contract.
Mhm.
And we didn't really have a mechanism to fund for it other than moving that Article 15 money into the overtime account.
Mhm. Okay. I might suggest that, this paper's also good for an advisory. If you have any idea that you may need something, fill out the form, get the advisory over, just so that we'll know.
She knows.
Yeah, I've had it on my radar. We're watching it. He hasn't gone over it yet, so
Okay.
as long as things stay status quo.
So we're
hope.
averaging, and I say that, we're averaging close to $6,000 a week in overtime.
Mhm.
Just because I've got 2 new ones coming on. I've got one in the academy now. I've still got one that's out with injury.
Mhm.
And we still have an open position, so it's just,
Right.
that's where I tell you, 5 people with the amount of lost hours that we've had.
Right.
Yep.
They have a high adrenaline, those guys and girls.
World Series.
They're crazy.
All right, any questions on the reserve fund? You guys know what this DEF system is? Have you ever run across it?
No, just the way Chief explained it.
No, because I've got 2 trucks that have it, and it
I'll
is a
say
pain in the ass.
they ruin all.
And my trucks that don't have it, people are after me all the time to buy it.
Yeah, they wanna buy it.
They want to buy it.
Yeah.
They run so much better without it.
Well, it's part of the, the green initiative. They want to make less emissions, and, they make less emissions, but they spend more time in the shop.
And there's nothing more frustrating when the code comes out, and the driver comes in and says, I can't drive this truck today.
Yeah.
All right, there being no other questions, I'll entertain a motion that we, what's the right word? That we pass the reserve fund transfer of $20,000 to the fire department for repairs.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? There being none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Those say no. And it's a vote, it's unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Okay. How soon, they still haven't got back to you yet?
No. And I'll be perfectly honest with you, based on, the analysis with this truck, I'm seriously considering, next time I have to purchase an engine, I'm gonna get rid of this truck instead of the oldest vehicle that I have. Just because of the amount of money that we put into it.
Hmm. What is it? Is it a Mack?
No, it's a KME.
A what?
KME,
KME.
yeah.
Yeah, keeps mechanics employed.
I like that.
I like that too.
I've never heard of a KME. You gotta be special made.
It's fire apparatus. Yeah. And we've had nothing but problems with it since we got it.
What year is it?
16, I'm gonna say.
Okay.
The other one, engine 2, is an 01, and I don't have any problems with it because it doesn't have a DEF system.
Right.
It's old school.
Yep.
The pump is all mechanical. It's not electronic like they are now.
Yep.
So there's no sensors being blown and getting wet. Yeah.
Chief, how's the enrollment in the academy?
So I have an individual there. There's a 6-month lead time with the academy, so there's people getting pushed through
And 6 months before they can enter?
before they can get in. Yeah. Well, there's a process. They've got to get the physical. They've got to pass a PAT test. So there's a process to get in, and then it's just the availability because the MFA has 3 sites where they run academies: Stowe, Springfield, and a new one down in Bridgewater. And they have them running all the time, but there's such a wait to get people through. I have 2 that are coming on next week that we've already been told June is the earliest they can get in.
So they can't work until?
No, they can, if they have all the certifications.
Okay.
The hiring within the fire service in today's age is difficult, and I'm using that word nicely.
Meaning competitive?
Meaning there's not a lot of selection out there.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of people who want to be involved in public service anymore.
Is a labor shortage?
Yep.
Yeah, that was the reason for the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing that
We're
across the
seeing that in a
board.
lot of places.
So, we've taken a,
Come on, every little kid grows up saying, I want to be a fireman.
right, you
Right?
think, but
It's not
it's
happening.
not. We've taken the approach that nothing's off the table. We hired a kid who was just a paramedic a year ago. He was a paramedic only, never stepped foot in a fire truck. But we brought him on because he had half the boxes checked. Once we get him to the academy, he fills the rest of the boxes. So he wasn't allowed on the fire truck for the first 3 months that he was there.
But it was a good ambulance driver, right?
But he was a great paramedic. And now he's fully certified.
Yep.
But yeah, it's difficult.
Yep.
And it's across the state, it's across the nation.
Mm.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to let us
Well,
in on?
If anybody wants to come down and do a visit, feel free. Especially with the substation committee moving forward, we'd like people to come down and see what the station looks like.
Mhm.
'Cause, we'll show you what it is.
Yeah.
Mm.
I do have to say, you did a good job with what you have, with the upgrade you did. It looks nicer down there. Not great, but it looks nicer.
Looks nice, and we still got some work to do.
Yeah, they did a good job though, with what they got.
We had some frozen pipe issues last thing, when the deep freeze came.
Mhm.
Had to replace a couple of doors. And now we're waiting on a fire escape to get replaced.
You don't have a good fire escape.
Nope.
There's gotta be a joke in there somewhere.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Yeah.
I don't know if the town of Charlton wants to hear that joke, so.
Okay. Chief, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Best of luck. All right, next on my agenda, since we're all done with the hearings. So I put down here the fire department transfer. Just a review of the school budget, because there were changes that happened last week that this committee may not be aware of, so I'd just like to have you talk about the reallocation
Yeah, go ahead.
that took place.
Andrew explained.
Yeah,
it
so
better.
essentially when the state released their budget figures, part of the assessment is based off what the state determines as the minimum net school spending. So that's a very complicated formula that basically goes and says, all right, the minimum amount the town of Charlton has to pay per student is this much. The minimum amount that Dudley has to pay this much. They base it off a number of different factors, such as growth of the town. Now, obviously, town of Charlton has had substantially higher growth than Dudley over the last few years, which is starting to catch up on that. Based off the net school spending formula, it's more of a 65 to 35 split versus the actual enrollment in the school, which is the remaining above minimum net school spending, which is a 57 to 40 to 53 to 47 split. So without changing the bottom line number on the actual budget, that assessment change increased our assessment from 1.9 million to 2.2 million increase over the prior year.
So 1.9 was what they
Right.
came to us when they appeared here.
Right, so basically just took money from Dudley's ask and swapped it to us. So their bottom line hasn't changed at all. It just took what Dudley was going to pay, lowered their amount and gave it, and it's now in our lap.
So, and of course, from the state calculation end, the increase in total Chapter 78 went up $200,000 from the prior year, which is a 0.8% increase in actual state aid, despite a 6.2% budgetary increase.
Mhm.
So that's essentially kind of where we stand with that. A 6.2% school increase with equating out to a 15% assessment increase. And trying to work that number because that is the number that the school, based off of all of their calculations, are saying is level service. Now typically we're a little bit less in the driver's seat because Dudley is in a more precarious payment situation, but because they're going for a override, they're more or less like, what's the number that we have to get to, and they're going to put it in their overall override assessment. So there's a lot of different moving parts as far as trying to negotiate the appropriate number without kind of cutting their nose off to spite their face of saying, all right, we're going to go for one number in Dudley and a different number in Charlton, and at the end of the day, we're not still going to have to cut services.
Right.
So.
Plus Dudley's override will not just take care of the school, but there are other issues
Right.
that they have in town.
Right.
They need more than just whatever the school ask was.
Yeah.
Right.
So quick question, I just want to clarify. Did you say that the state's increase in funding to the school system overall
Mhm.
from last year to this year was
Mhm.
$200,000?
Yep, $30 per student. They basically we're one of, apparently it's 38% of school districts that are considered held harmless because our enrollment continues to drop. So because it's not continually increasing enrollment,
Right.
they're essentially saying, well, you're lucky that we're not cutting your state aid, so we're just gonna give you the $30 per student.
Yeah, that's a national trend though, the decline in enrollment.
Right.
It's not really a Massachusetts thing.
Right, but the way that the Chapter 70 formula is outlined is that money more or less goes toward schools with,
That are able to kind of hit that net minimum.
either they have some increase in enrollment
Right.
or there's environmental justice populations or.
It's everybody like east of 495.
Yeah,
Right,
the
right.
495 corridor has
Yeah,
has
those take care
a
of that.
substantially higher amount of
State funding.
state funding that meets that
Yeah,
target. Yep.
exactly.
So when you start talking about, changing the formula, there's
It's not
obviously
gonna
gonna be a
happen.
lot of legislators out there that get calls to say you can't cut
Mhm.
guarantees.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where the political power is.
Mhm, I'm not here.
So that's one thing that we're gonna have to take into account, their bigger ask. The next as Andrew and Ashley alluded to earlier, they're still looking for $500,000 from us by
That's good.
June 30th
Yep,
to fund this feasibility study, right?
yeah, it's like 535 or 530 something.
Yeah, that's based off the population, or
Percentage.
the percentage.
Yeah.
Now, that's the thing where potentially we could get some of it back.
Yes.
It's
Right.
reimbursable.
It is reimbursed.
Yeah.
But like
Right.
later.
Yes.
Right, right. Then it becomes more, you're right, Christian, it becomes more of a cash flow issue
Mhm,
than
mhm.
than
Right.
a budgetary issue. But when you don't have the cash, it might as
Right.
well be a budget issue,
Right,
okay?
right.
Yeah, we ran the numbers on the average single-family taxpayer to do a capital override would be about $82 per household per year, or for that 1 year.
Right.
Mhm.
So
So it'd be a one-time hit for just the FY '24 bills, and then that's it. And it goes away. So it wouldn't be a permanent override, just one time. It's like almost like a debt exclusion, but it's just for 1 year. For that one debt.
21 cents per thousand is
Yeah.
kind of what it came out to. So
Mhm. Then the other thing I heard during the selectmen's meeting, which I hadn't realized previous, was the funds to pay teachers, the
The
money-
ESSER money,
that's our money.
ESSER money.
that's like their
How does that
ARPA
work?
equivalent.
A little more detail than what I,
Right, it's the ARPA, you know, it's essentially the ARPA money that went directly to schools. But there is a number of paraprofessional and education positions that are being funded, that were added when the ESSER money came in, that will end at the end of 2024.
Yeah.
So as we're this budget year, they were looking to try to transfer some of that money into their operating budget to plan for that
Mhm.
drop off, but it was about
It was
$100,000 of $1 million that they're using right now in salaries. So as we're looking at 2025, that's gonna be a whole nother discussion about, all right, you have one-time revenues funding 21 positions.
gotcha.
What's gonna happen to those 21
Gotcha.
positions, or the town's gonna have to eat those costs as well. So we're not even seeing this as being all right, this is a one-time 15% increase. This could be a conversation
Right.
Right.
for next year as well.
Because they're already starting off at what, 1.2 or $1.2 million in the hole for next year.
Yeah.
Mm.
Just funding all
So that's
those
the biggest
positions.
argument for never using one-time revenues for operating
Right,
expenses,
that's why
which
we
is the
didn't do
philosophy
that.
we've
Yeah.
Right.
pretty much stuck to here in
Mhm.
town,
Mhm.
okay?
Yep.
But yeah.
Well, I think a lot of that
Okay.
went to
You're-
counselors and paras, right? To
Right,
kinda
exactly.
Yeah, and then I think
COVID
they funded
issues.
their facilities person through that, which is what
Mhm.
they're saying is gonna save them so much money on the MSBA and the roof project.
Mhm.
Cause you
Right.
won't have to have a OPM.
Mm.
So that's, I think, that's one of the positions they wanna fund in this year's budget.
Mm. You would think a facilities person's almost self-funding by the amount of preventative stuff that they're
I
able
know.
to foresee.
Yeah,
right?
so they wanna pull that
Disasters that
position
are,
out of
like, but you would think
ESSER.
town-wide you'd need that really,
Mhm.
not just school buildings.
I know.
Oh, before we forget, so everybody's gonna, yeah, anywhere on one of those lines, we'll sign it, get that over with.
Oh, well, that wasn't uplifting.
So I know the Board of Selectmen at their meeting last week not voted, well, did they actually officially vote, or they just
They
kind of?
No,
took
they-
an
Gave you
official,
guidance.
they took an official position that
Yeah.
they felt that the school assessment should be no higher than a $1.3 million increase. And I backed that number up into the actual assessment figure, and that would essentially mean that from what the school presented to what they would have to get down to would require them to cut $1.7 million out of their proposed budget.
Mhm.
So how they would get to that number is, you know, to be seen, or if they're even willing to go that far.
Mhm.
You know, hopefully that they take it under advisement and kind of work towards something that does work, you know, that nobody's happy with,
Mhm.
but we'll see.
So in essence, in my mind anyway, the Board of Selectmen drew the line in the sand and said, all right, either meet it or come up with something else, okay? And we'll take our cue from what the Board of Selectmen and the school committee negotiate, all right? Our job in my mind, our job is to figure out how it gets paid for, where it comes from and how it gets, all right? But we'll let them fight out what the number should be, okay? So, But I wanna make sure everybody's aware that that's what's happening on the other side, okay?
We're planning for all scenarios, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. One last question on this. Is there any chance the governor's gonna come out with something that's better than what we?
So
That was our
the
budget.
governor's budget. What we have to be relying on now is the House and Senate. And
Oh.
what we've seen over the last few years is kind of a, you know, the Senate version of the budget being the best.
Right.
Because they'll typically throw additional funding toward regional transportation, additional money toward, you know, I think last year they bumped it from $30 per student for the minimum contribution to 60. And I know that there's already been some advocacy for bumping it to $100 per student, but whether or not it gets there is,
Right.
you know, remains to be seen. What, you know, kind of gives me a little bit of, I don't know, hesitation though, is that we have a new governor.
Right.
It's a Democratic governor, and whether or not they want to just support, looking at Democratic governor with a Democratic
House and
House
Senate.
House and
Yeah.
Senate, whether or not they want to champion her budget versus making too many drastic changes.
Right. Because before we had a Republican governor and a
Yeah.
Democratic House and Senate,
Yeah.
so they kind of,
You could see that the governor would come out with his budget, they'd essentially just throw it in the trash and come out with their own.
Yeah.
So,
this was always not substantially higher, but definitely.
different priorities.
Yeah, quite a bit higher
Right.
as it would go down the line.
So it's maybe. That's the answer.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
All
We
right.
kind of counted on it in the other years, and this year we're kind of like,
But if $30 gives us 200 and,
Yeah, 60 is
200,000
not-
and change, $100 not really
Right.
gonna make up what we're looking for.
oh yeah, definitely.
They'll find a way to pull it out elsewhere.
Good. All
One
right.
question, jumping subjects on the fire budget. So the finance director's 3% reduction
Yes.
in agreement
That
to
was
what the fire chief is asking
Taking
for?
his 4 people out.
Is that what it was doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically, if you look at the budget that I posted online,
Yep,
or the budgets that are in your packets, any new ask for any employee was cut with the exception of bumping the full-time position in building up for his,
Inspector.
inspector, thank you. And then the
Dispatcher.
dispatcher, those are the only technically new
New hire.
positions, and the inspector position isn't new, we just bumped him from part-time to full-time, so those were the only like 2 new positions that I kept, everything else that was asked for was cut.
Yeah. The townwide mechanic,
yeah,
right, this is not a first-year ask.
yeah.
That's kind of rattled around.
Yeah, he's brought it up.
The
a
scary
thousand
thing is, that's
times.
probably one of the more logical requests you can come up
Yeah, I
with.
know.
When you realize the labor rates that some of these companies charge.
Yeah, even just to
Yeah.
change, if you just had someone probably changing oils and brake pads, I bet you would keep that person employed all day.
Right.
Just doing the general,
Yeah.
if you think about how many vehicles we have in town.
But then you go into these major repairs and they're charging you $85 an hour, or whatever they're charging.
Right, so you just think
know,
you'd probably
it's
save
just-
how much money
yeah.
on just doing brake
Yeah.
changes,
Yeah.
tire rotations, oil changes, like the normal
Where it's-
stuff that probably happens a lot more often.
Okay.
And then the other one that's been floating around here for years is that rotating
Assistant,
secretary
yeah.
Mhm.
person in this building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And more or less, it's not really, you know, we've taken that out from being a rotating one to being one that's supportive of essentially this half the building.
Mhm.
You know, just the administrative land use and could be that front-facing person. That's more or less the ask now.
Yeah, okay.
Versus it being a true floater.
Yeah, so I think the departments that needed the extra person have gotten part-time people now,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it kind of helped with their ask.
Yeah, no, I know in my conversation with Kurt, he was talking about, he takes his office up here, takes a wall out, puts a reception desk, who then, yes, would handle, I guess you're right,
Right.
would everything on this end of the
Yeah.
building, would be the receptionist for
Yeah,
planning.
this end plus
and-
Board of Health.
and all the
Land
rest
use,
of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it allows to be able to service the public a lot better and not just have to be closed because one person took a day off.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
Or it's
someone's
out
on vac-
doing an inspection.
Right, or, yeah, because if Kurt's on, if his assistant's on, administrative assistant is on vacation or out to lunch or whatever, he closes the office if he's out on an
Right.
inspection.
Right. So say there are lots of good uses for money we unfortunately don't have right now, but
Right.
we gotta find a way to get some.
Yeah.
Which is why, as I said to you, I'm in favor of a 2.5 override, just to raise some money in this town.
When was the last time we did it?
for the schools,
2017, I think it was.
Was it the
It was for the
big
schools
house?
too.
But it went off to the
Yeah.
schools. Every dollar of it.
Yeah.
Oh,
That
you're
was
talking about, no, no.
Override, that was an override, so
I was
override,
thinking of the
so the
Cape Cod
override is
renovation.
permanent, so when you do an override, it's a permanent increase
Right.
to your tax
Right,
base.
right.
And then any debt exclusion is just for the life of your debt.
Right.
So if you borrow for 20 years, it's for that 20 years, and after the 21st year, that falls off. Whereas your overrides are permanent.
So-
So they did an override for the school, I think in 2017, it was I wanna say it was a 3-year override.
Well,
But
Well,
that
it's
was always the
permanent,
argument.
so-
It wasn't in my mind, actually, it wasn't a 3-year per se over. All it said was, we'll support this.
Right.
We'll give you the money for 3 years that you can't ask for any other money.
Right,
That's, to me, why it became a 3-year override.
Right.
Okay? And that's pretty much worked, okay?
Right.
Well, the third year, I think that was your first year, wasn't it?
well, 3rd year would have been 19.
No, it wasn't.
It was 19.
So that was
came
my,
in
that was
after.
my first year, and then
Okay.
COVID hit.
And
I
they
think
came back
next
and
year.
said, no, that was a 2-year. And
Yeah.
then we had this little argument.
Yeah.
Okay, no, it was 3 years,
I
but
remember.
anyway. But that's why I believe an override that's a permanent thing, okay? If we raise $2 million forever, right? Look what we could do with $2 million, right? Now, what would that equate to a tax increase on people's homes? If you figured it was $82 for that other money, okay?
80 cents per thousand. I would guess probably 80 cents per thousand, so.
Right? And the average home here is what,
350.
320?
160.
I think we're more than 320. I think you're almost at 4. I think this year, yeah,
Almost 350.
the values went up.
Okay.
Those values went up.
That's probably $280 per household per year, on average.
All right. Which.
For the
you-
first year.
You put that number out there, okay, and it sounds like a big number, and yeah, you're gonna get pushback, I understand that, right? But it comes down to what kind of town do we wanna live in?
Yeah, what level
Right.
of service are you looking for?
Right.
Right.
And unfortunately, the old adage is old because it's true, you get what you pay for. And if we're not willing to dig deep and pay for some of this stuff like a substation or some more help, okay, a mechanic, that kind of, you know, sometimes I think we are short-sighted. We're trying to save the dime and we forget about the dollar that we would save.
Without a doubt. Now, again, the mechanic example is a classic example of, we're not hiring a mechanic, but we're paying probably 2 or 3 times in the budget.
Right.
For the same services.
Yeah.
Not only that, but the chief brought up a good point. What do you think it costs him when someone has to drive a fire truck from Charlton to Hopkinton, and then somebody else has to follow him to bring him back?
You wonder
So
why,
you've got-
wonder why overtime hours are
I'll
up.
say he's
Right.
bringing both of those people in at overtime. It's not anybody on duty. That's
Right,
both
right,
overtime
Right,
coverage.
right. So there's 6 hours, okay, to get from here to Hopkinton and back, okay,
Yeah.
for 2 people, right? Where you're right, you could pay the mechanic $85 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And he can fix it right here. Well,
Yep.
maybe not this problem, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that we have to kind of weigh too, is, sorry, how many oil changes, brake changes and all that are we going through? And how much is gonna be well beyond the technical expertise of a single person?
Right.
So.
And how much are you gonna start paying, and the cost of you have to start carrying more oil, have to have brakes, go get brake pads.
Yeah. I think
But-
I did a quick, it was basically, if it's any more than 360 hours per year that we're spending in technical time and doing it, then it would pay for itself.
Right.
Maybe 60 was the number?
What is it, approximately?
Yeah, a good ballpark number,
Yeah.
right.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
very part-time,
Mm.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, think of that.
Yeah,
I mean, that's 9 weeks of labor.
right.
Yeah.
That was using like $64,000 salary
Yeah.
times $200 an hour. So if it was $200 an hour to work on a vehicle, it'd be around 360 hours-ish, of recovery.
Right.
Yeah.
So, anything beyond that is money
Money in
saved.
the bank.
Right.
Wow.
My God.
Right.
How many more examples are like that?
Right.
You know?
Now, these are the things, okay, that the finance committee, when they submit the budget, or these guys give us a budget and say, this is what, we can say, we have the right to say, geez, we think we should add this.
Right.
Because we
Yeah.
think it makes sense.
Yeah.
And then we submit that, or pass it over to the Board of Selectmen. And they can have their go at it. right? But that's how we can influence,
Yeah.
right, where we see the savings, right? Now, before we do that, we would have to do the kind of study you just talked about, all right, how many hours, how many oil changes,
Yeah.
whatever, you know, I
And
would
do you
certainly.
have a space for this
Right,
person?
yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
probably have to have that conversation too with Highway, because that's one thing that we haven't gotten that request from Highway yet, of saying, hey, you know, I wanted to add a mechanic, and I'm sure it's, you know, budget conscious and
Yeah.
being careful about what he asks for.
And Jerry's always very good about.
Right,
He is,
exactly,
yeah.
yes, so he doesn't wanna ask for something that he doesn't,
Yeah.
I wanna say feel like he ultimately needs, cause he's been
Yeah.
great about being, you know, a good steward of his
Mhm.
budget.
Yeah.
But, you
Yeah,
know,
we
he is
gotta-
gonna be
we gotta do the
retiring.
marketing.
Right, he's
Okay.
gotta be retiring, we'll have a new DPW director coming in, and I'm sure it may be a consideration of the
Yeah.
new person to say, this may be a staffing need that they could support.
But you get the different departments to buy in, like
Right.
the police and fire are both buying into a dispatcher. They both see the benefit to their departments. You know, it's not coming out of his budget, it's coming out of, but they see it. So these departments are willing to work together that way. All we gotta do is show them.
Yeah.
If you do, here's what you save. And here's what you save in your budget.
Right.
Okay? And you, which you could then spend on something else
Yeah.
within your, or actually, no, we would take that and put it to the mechanic, right? You can't give with one hand and not take with the
Right.
other.
Exactly.
But I just wanted to bring that up so that you guys all know, okay, this is where we can influence.
I'm sure.
And if the selectmen vote us down, we can always say, well, we don't support this plan at the town meeting. I never want to do that. I mean, that would be.
I'm gonna do one of these.
I know, right? I'm behind
I'm just saying, that's how drastic it could get.
Come on, Henry, you wanna make changes?
Somebody comes up to the microphone, asks a question, I'm gonna be like, I'm deferring that.
Yeah. Anything else? All right, so then we've got update from the finance spring town manager. You got anything else?
So I think we just kind of want to get a feel, since now you've met with all the, pretty much all the departments, of where you guys stand on all the asks
Mm-hmm,
and how you want us to go forward with the budget
mm-hmm.
to present to try to have a balanced budget for, because I think the schools meeting tonight, so we'll get their actual budget pushed forward for.
We'll get the same number
Right.
after tonight that they've already pushed, and then it's more or less the start of negotiations, hopefully.
Yeah.
They can't go any higher after tonight, after their hearing, but they can reduce their assessment.
Right.
So,
So we can kind of get a feel from them if they happen to come down at all, based on what the selectmen had said, but kind of where you guys feel, so I can try to get a balanced budget for you to move forward with, so then we can
Mhm.
start discussing from there and see where we want to go after that.
All right, my thought on carrying a number for the school, I was comfortable with the 1.7, certainly not the 2.2 that they're asking. Right? I would like to, I personally would like to see a budget that incorporated the 1.7. How does that affect the rest of the budget? Okay. I'm not in agreement with some of the things I heard at the Board of Selectmen's meeting. You can't do 1.1, 1.2. That's just, that would devastate the school.
It's drastic.
Yeah.
So I would like to see a 1.7 number
Okay.
that we can take a look at. It might be interesting to see a 2.2 number,
Okay.
just so that we can say, okay, here's their full ask, here's what we think we can do. And if we go with their full ask, look at what we gotta cut, okay, or look what we can't fund,
Mm.
right? Because again, without the information, how do we justify to anybody what we, think is.
Where did the 1.7, that was the original ask, the initial?
Their original ask was 1.9 before the shift.
Yeah, it was 1.9.
Yeah. So the 1.7 would be a cut from their budget.
And like, even at the 1.9, I was still thinking of the 1.7, okay? I mean, they gotta come down a little bit, you know? I mean, we can't not fund things here in town and say to the school, oh, you have a blank check, right?
Of course.
You're looking for some sort of compromise.
So I was looking, yeah,
so
my personal
Seems fair to
opinion.
me.
And that's why I was a little saddened to hear last week at the board, at the selectmen's meeting, that they upped it to 2.2, okay? I was having a hard enough time swallowing the 1.9.
and the schools they recognize that 2.2 is a non-starter for the town.
Yeah.
They won't even entertain putting that on the warrant.
Right.
So they want to work and try to move that number down, but they know that the only way that they're going to go all the way down to the 1.3 or below is if Dudley's override fails.
Right.
They'd
Right.
rather move a little bit down and hope that Dudley still passes, feel a little bit of pain, and get there. But they're not gonna be able to go to 1.3, because at that point, it's gonna be, like, why are we even going for the override in Dudley?
Right.
Is there a general consensus in Dudley that's gonna pass on that, or?
I have heard mixed
Really?
reviews.
And I think we've heard if it fails the first time, they're gonna try to go back a second time,
Right.
which would be after our town meeting.
Right.
So we would have no idea at that point.
So the following month? they kinda-
In June, yeah.
Okay.
Yep, and then they'd have to go back, I don't know how they would do that, cause their town meeting's the week after ours usually. So they'd have already had passed the budget, so I don't know if they're gonna pass the budget with the override in mind, or what they'll do, if they'd have to go back.
Yeah.
Is their override basically built on the school, even though it's not all the school? Is it primarily?
Primarily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they do have, some operational asks, and I think that that's more or less what they're trying to do to sell it, is to say that this isn't just the school, it's the whole town.
Yeah.
Right.
So, we'll see how it plays out, but I would say that whatever we take to town meeting has to almost like hold into account that they're going to try to force an override in
Yeah.
some way, shape, or form. And try to be conservative, and if we are in a better position, either from the assessment figure or new growth wise than what we're projecting now in the fall, potentially adding the additional positions then when we have a better feel for where we're at. That's kind of what we've done the last few years with, where we've been very conservative with new growth and then gone in and utilized that to build our stabilization.
Right.
And now that we're almost at 10%, we could look at that for actual municipal growth.
We'll be at like 9 point, if we passed a budget with the school ask, just seeing like what the bond dollar is compared to what we are on stabilization, we'd be like 9% different, as we were looking at the other day.
We would drop.
We would, well, yes, because your budget's going up. So if you were to keep a budget at what the school asked, if we could balance to that number for whatever reason, we were just
Because,
looking.
right, our overall budget
Because your overall
would go
budget
up.
goes up, so your 10% number will change.
Right, your target,
Yeah,
Mm.
your target moves.
because we were talking about if somebody came to raise stabilization at town meeting, I was like, no, we wouldn't be at our 10%, and then I was like, just calculate what we would be at. So we were looking at it.
In no way.
So that's gonna, you'd have to dump money into that.
The number keeps going up, we gotta
Yeah.
keep
We
putting
got, I
money
was
in.
gonna say, we
Yeah.
gotta figure out a way to get it above the,
Yeah.
depending on the budget.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
we
if you
can't-
sit, we're
Come on,
pretty much right at
kids.
10%, so every time you raise the budget, that number drops.
Ashley, you know how many years it took us to
I
get
know,
to
that's why I was like, I
10%,
don't-
okay?
we can't go
I'm
below-
not
we can't
ready
go
to
too much
just let
below.
it go
That's what-
on a,
That was what I
Haven't
said.
even borrowed on it yet.
I know, I was like, please don't touch my
Right.
stabilization, we're
Yeah.
at 10%.
we haven't even got the fruits of that labor yet,
I know.
okay? If you'd already done one bond issue, okay, and
Right.
said, hey, we just saved 2% on.
Yeah, that was my.
We
that
haven't
was my
even done that
reaction.
yet.
So we will have to put some in at town meeting in October to get back up to 10, but it
Right.
shouldn't be anywhere near as bad as it's been.
Right.
So that's good. 'Cause we're
Well,
not
let's
too
just
far
keep
away.
this year's budget low enough
That's-
that we stay
so-
above the 10%.
that's what I said,
That's
too.
your job, 0%. Between the two of you.
That's what I said, right?
Yeah, all right?
So-
You having fun over there, George? Yeah.
Having a blast.
Huh?
I love being a wallflower.
How do you guys feel about the new positions that have, so we had the 4 from fire, the facilities, the land use. I think that's it,
The
right?
deputy chief.
Deputy chief, yes, for police, so those were the,
Those were the asks.
those were the new, and then obviously, the local inspector was an increase.
Yeah.
And then the library asked to just bump their, that was like a small bump, to change their,
There's a title change.
yeah, and a little bit of a
Degree.
salary, but yeah, cause she's getting her master's, so that's, I left that in the budget. That's on there too, but everything else is out of there, so I just didn't know if you bumped it down, if you took the school's number at 1.7, did you wanna try to fund any of the positions, do you want me to try to fund any of them, do we wanna leave any of them out, are there any that you
If-
support?
If we can get it down to the 1.7, there's a few positions that, yes, I would like to see us try and fund, okay?
Do you have an order of operations you'd like to go in?
You said you definitely already have the
Well, I think
dispatcher.
the
in there,
dispatcher's
right?
already-
So the
Dispatcher
six,
is not
six dispatcher, yeah, that was,
Okay, so that's
because we
included.
technically funded the 6 dispatcher with free cash in the fall, so he's
Okay.
filling the position now.
Mhm.
So that's in there,
Mhm.
that's to stay.
And what was the,
So it was 4 firefighters, a deputy chief position for police, a facilities tech, a land use department. admin, and then, the bump to a full-time position for the local inspector. Were kind of like your new
Yeah.
people
I
asked.
remember that.
Well, the
Correct.
chief tonight was more than friendly, saying, you know, he gets it, it could be a
Yeah.
4 or 5 year plan,
Right.
Yeah.
so.
So.
He
like
comes
two
in-
firemen.
Yeah, like I said,
Yeah, so he
yeah.
comes to ask for 4 because he has 4 groups, so he can add 1 to each shift, so it would be an even add.
Right.
That's why he comes and asks for 4, why he doesn't just come and ask for 1 person like the other departments. He asks for 4 to add 1 to each group, so it keeps the groups even, so he can equally staff.
But,
But he said he would stagger if he,
all right, well, what I would like you to do, Ashley, is put that into a memo type, okay?
Okay.
Form of all the different positions.
okay,
We'll get it out, because there's 3 members that aren't here.
Right.
And we'll prioritize it.
okay,
We'll, right, that'll be our goal, is to
Yep.
prioritize the personnel. Right now, we're just gonna deal with personnel,
Yeah.
right?
yes.
Yeah.
And
No-
what we would like to do is be a little bit more conservative than we are right now with our new growth.
Yep.
So that way we can come back in the fall and have good news and not have to come back in the fall and say we have to do cuts.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
because for one reason or another, we miss it. We are going through a very, I would say tumultuous, but it's in a good way. We're trying to project some very aggressive growth that's going on, and we want to make sure that we're staying conservative enough
Yeah.
that we're not
Right.
jumping.
Right.
Right.
We have to kind of stay in that little, in that
Yeah.
sweet spot, so we're not overspending where we were, so we're having to eat it in the fall, but we could also
Yeah.
possibly put ourselves in a good position, so.
I don't wanna be sitting here a year from now saying, geez, it fell apart.
Right, that's how we
Who
feel
gonna
too,
get?"
yeah.
Right.
Or even, as we're saying, looking more or less 2 to 3 years down the road as that municipal growth factor in the school budget continues to increase, and all of a sudden, we don't have an Amazon, we don't have a large distribution
Right.
network that's under construction, and our new growth drops back down to the $300,000 a
Right.
year it had been prior to the last
Right.
the last 4 years. And all of a sudden, we are in that position of saying, well, we've been in such a trajectory of growth that now we need an override to sustain it.
Yep.
Right, 'cause
That's
that
what
new,
we want to
yeah, that
avoid.
new growth is gonna catch up with you when you don't have it in that school factor, and it's still gonna sway your way until that new, cause it's like a 5-year average.
I was
and
just
that-
gonna say, cause
It's gonna
a
fall off,
5-year
so
look back.
yeah, so
Right.
like at year 5 from, if you go 5 years out from today, your new growth is still gonna affect you, but we're not gonna have a brand new Amazon
Right.
facility, you're not gonna have a brand new LNG
It's
facility.
kinda like that
everything.
accident on your car insurance that you pay for the next 5
Yeah.
years, even though it didn't happen for
Right.
quite a while.
So at that point, if you keep coming back and keep asking or need stuff, do you go for an override then, cause you can't afford something?
All right, so if you send out that with the list
Yep.
of people that we can prioritize, and then, once we do that, we'll send it back and come up with again, a couple of different budgets, one that says at 1.7, one that says at, 2.2. I'd be curious to see what, I already know what it would do, it'll kill everything,
Yeah, you have
okay?
to make lots of cuts here.
So that then we can say, all right, this is where we think we should really head, okay?
Yep.
Anything else?
Do you wanna talk about, do you want their stance on the funding for?
Oh, yeah. I don't know if you want to take any sort of official position tonight on the substation and the feasibility study.
Mhm.
I know I kind of thrown out a couple of options, but I know that the Board of Selectmen is going to have a conversation about both on Tuesday, and whether or not I want to provide some recommendation from the Finance Committee
Mhm.
on either one of those.
On the school, yeah, the school.
Yeah, the feasibility study for the school and
Feasibility,
the feasibility
right.
study for the fire station.
Yeah.
What's the cost on the fire station study?
We're looking at $125,000 from free cash.
So currently, right now, I have 600,000 in free cash. You know you're gonna have snow and ice, he's in a deficit. He just applied for sent in his memo for emergency, so he's over budget.
Mhm.
So we have that off the top, because we usually take that from free cash. So
Mhm.
you're gonna have that in the back of your mind to think about too. And that's the only overage I foresee at the moment, that you're gonna need to pull money for free cash. I think we're good in everything else for
And
right
of
now.
course, the school is $500,000.
Right. So I think.
The thing
in
about the school
talking-
is that there's an end date.
Right,
Right.
right, yeah. So in talking with, Highway and looking at their average, anywhere from 100 to 130,000, I think additional we're gonna need to fund their budget
Mhm.
for snow and ice.
Okay.
So the only thing with snow and ice that we do have, that we can do if we had to, you can raise it on next year's taxes. That's the only, one of the only accounts that you're allowed to raise the next year if it's in a deficit at the end of the fiscal year.
Mhm.
So if for whatever reason, if you wanted to allocate all the free cash to something else, you could do that. So that's something to keep in your mind too.
Mhm. We also have $130,000 in the reserve fund, not that I wanna empty that before the end of the year.
That's more of an emergency.
Yeah, that you
But
could
that's
use
an
for,
emergency.
yeah.
But no, it's just, I didn't know whether there was something we could use this for and then take that money and move it somewhere else. I don't know. That's
Oh,
a shell
it's-
game.
Yeah,
Well-
that's hard, cause that's only unforeseen, unexpected.
Right. That's how, I mean, that's kinda how we felt with a lot of this stuff, is
Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's all taxpayer money, and it's
Right.
all
Right.
reserved. So it's more or less of how is the most beneficial way of selling it.
Right.
Yep.
So the fire feasibility study, I'm assuming, is to locate, well, determine the need to relocate and build new.
Yeah, it would give you a
Size.
area, the best area to put a building
Yeah.
with the building plans to put forward to town meeting for for the fall,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
vote whether
And
the
I
town
would give
equals
that a
support
higher
building.
priority than the school.
I think they're both important, like
Well,
I would
I'm-
favor both of them, you know, personally, that's just me personally.
I didn't say it wasn't important, I just said a higher priority.
No, no, I know
That's
what you
all,
mean,
yeah.
but I just,
Yeah,
I
choose
think
one.
they're
Yeah.
both
I
like
have to choose
overdue.
one or
Right.
the other.
So the thing with, the only thing you have, with the school that you don't have with the fire station feasibility study is you could go for a debt exclusion, or a capital exclusion on that one, so that's a
Mhm.
one-time.
On the
What
school.
would be the
For the
benefit?
So on the fire station, you would find the money somewhere in town,
Yes,
and on the school,
you could go for just, you could go
Then-
for a capital exclusion. Just it's a one-time,
Increase to the
yeah, and you're,
taxes just to pay for that.
Just
one.
for one.
Yeah,
Right,
so the
and
way
as you
Andrew
said
and I-
before, it's reimbursable.
right, that's, so
Oh,
Andrew and
right, so
I.
it gives you the timing, I see.
Right, we were thinking
Cash
since
flow.
you're gonna, I mean, there's no way you're gonna be able to afford an MSBA program within the levy limit, you're gonna have to debt exclude that.
Oh, yeah.
So since you're already going to be debt excluding that, it's kind of the same money, so you're using it as an exclusion anyway, and it's reimbursable, so it will come off.
Right.
So find the
That's kinda
fire
how we
station
thought.
money in town and debt exclude
Yeah.
the school.
And at least it give the taxpayers front looking like, hey, the school is going for this is your
Right.
chance to say whether you support this money or not.
Right.
If you support them, going to look for a new school.
Yeah.
If you can pass a $500,000 override for,
Right.
for a new school, there's a better chance that you'll probably get that same vote when the $200 million
Right.
debt exclusion comes up.
Right.
So,
Let's hope it's not that high.
I know.
but, you know, just, you know, you don't wanna go out there, oh, I didn't know, you know, I
Right.
didn't even know they were doing this, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
out there and vote.
At least then it's our chance to say, well, you know, there was on town meeting, you
Yeah.
Yeah.
should attend.
I mean, think about the results of that school study. It's gonna be destroy the building, build new.
Mhm.
Well,
Right.
Just-
Do you think so?
yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Hey, how much did a new school in Worcester cost?
Yeah, Doherty.
Oh, that was outrageous.
$218 million.
Yeah, it's like three
Okay.
buildings, so, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But if it's being built 5 years from now, what's escalation gonna do?
right,
Right.
right.
But Priority's
And-
2 and 1 too, I don't think they're that
When,
number.
when we
are
talked
they?
about it, you came up with what our
Bartlett.
share could be as high as 60 million, right?
Right.
So that's what we'd be looking at.
For a 30-year debt.
Right.
30-year
Yeah,
debt of
there's no
$60
way
million.
60's better than 200.
Well, it's,
Right, yeah.
it would be
Yeah.
60%,
Yeah,
it'd be-
60% of the 200,
Reasonable.
it's 200, not 200, just us, 200 over the project, so it's 60%.
Right, right.
and then divided by, and then
Right.
essentially
Four.
5347.
The Bay Path renovation, what was that, back 5 years? What
That was 57 million.
Yeah, and that was how many years ago? 2017, 2014, somewhere in there?
Something around that, yeah, we're still paying for that one.
That was a
Split between
renovation,
11
right?
towns.
Yeah, that was a
Yeah.
renovation.
Yeah, split between, 11 towns.
But yeah, you can't renovate Shepherd.
No.
It's too far gone.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's too
Yeah,
far
no,
gone.
that's bad money. Doing
All right, so you got your direction to tell the board?
All right. Number one priority being the.
Fire station.
Number one, it's the fire station,
Oh.
but I'm just thinking for the debt exclusion, as
The
far as
capital,
funding,
yeah.
funding mechanism.
Right.
First would be the capital exclusion, and
Yep.
second would be
Yep.
the
And if
Yeah, free
it comes
cash.
down, we'll know better in May, obviously, because, well, April by the time we have to do the warrant, beginning of May.
Yep.
We'll hopefully be done by then, so we'll know what the number will be by then, so we
Mhm.
could always, if we had to fund whatever we had left in free cash, we could fund part towards the school, and then you could exclude the rest of it, or
Yep.
if we had to, we could split it too.
Okay. Good.
Very complicated budget.
I know.
Yeah.
Sure. Lots
So
of
is-
different
That's what
last
makes
year.
it interesting.
Is the exclusion that you were talking about, this like 1 year version, because I'm just not familiar with it, is that the sort of thing where there's a vote at town meeting and a vote at the ballot?
So,
to be able
it would go
do
to a
something
ballot
like that?
vote technically first, if we're thinking, if we're gonna do that, we would probably try to we'll have to put it on the May election ballot. And then when you pass your budgets, it would be in that budget, so it's passed in the town meeting budget with your override.
Okay, and the fire feasibility study, you're saying that we would somehow find a way to just fund that in another already existing mechanism? No.
You'd-
Free
And
cash.
through free cash,
Free
yeah, because we have,
cash,
we
that's
have
what it
some
was,
in there.
thank you.
And that would go on the May
Sorry,
town
I
meeting
just
warrant.
trying to.
Yeah, so you would see the capital exclusion on the May ballot,
Mhm.
and then you would see, it would be funded in the budget when we pass the budget in May.
2 weeks later.
You
Yeah.
could pull, I mean, with not taking the money for the feasibility study out of ARPA, you could pull it from there and essentially just go, here you go, do the full study. My concern with that is that you're not giving it any due diligence before town meeting before
Oh,
doing
yeah,
that.
makes good sense.
Yeah, because ARPA, only the selectmen have to vote on it, so it's
Yeah.
like the selectmen are just pushing this project on everybody, so we
Yeah, I see
didn't
what
wanna
you're saying.
fully, I mean, even if we use some ARPA funds, we didn't wanna use all of it, cause we want the taxpayers to be able to have their
Right,
say.
right, you want consensus, yeah,
Yeah.
I understand.
So it's not just we're pushing this
To
project
come
on
back and
everybody.
say, all right, here's a $10 million project. Where
Right.
did this come from?
Right.
Right.
So,
All right, that's everything I had on my agenda.
yep.
Good. I'll
I know
entertain a
it.
motion to adjourn. I have a
moved.
motion, I have a second.
No one wants to adjourn meetings today.
I first did everything tonight.
Yes, okay. That is a vote.
But yes, I'd
Unanimous.
like to go home. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.